Okay, so we might have a couple more folks trickle in, but we can get going slowly but surely. As a reminder, I think everybody has their video off. If you need to, click those three dots and hide all non-video participants, make it easier for you. And as a reminder, we now have the live transcript button on the bottom if you need it. So yes, please sign in for the session 3 on the bottom. And let's see, we can go ahead. Once I find my document. Welcome to session 3. Somehow we are already at our last session of the day, but we are so excited to have everybody still here with us. And I am pleased to introduce Dr. Susanna Ural. She is a professor of history and a senior research fellow in the Dale Center for the Study of War and Society at the University of Southern Mississippi. She's the author of numerous books, articles, blog posts, columns, and public lectures on the U.S. Civil War era, especially aspects dealing with soldiers and communities at war. Dr. Ural's work in the digital humanities includes a study of Mississippi's Confederate home and most recently her role as the director of the Civil War and Reconstruction Governors of Mississippi project, which we will hear more about today. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ural, and we're excited for a good third session of the day.
Thank you for that intro. Good morning, everybody. It's good to see you, or at least see names. If anybody wants to turn on cameras, by all means, feel free. That's always lovely. But I also understand it's Saturday and it's the third session of the day, and you might not want to. So I am here today to talk with you about I just kind of think about it as like fresh tools and fresh material to maybe kind of jazz up the way that you're covering the period of the U.S. Civil War and Reconstruction in your classrooms. I am, hopefully y'all can see this PowerPoint. If somebody can give me a thumbs up that they can see it, just to be sure. Good, perfect, thank you. So I'm just here to kind of make sure you're aware of these tools and how you could use them, and just kind of get some input from y'all about, how you might actually use them in the classroom too. I'm interested to hear that as well, because that helps us make sure we're doing the work you need. I don't think there's probably some more insulting things, but I think it's insulting to just dump a whole bunch of documents on teachers. I'm more interested in making sure we make this as kind of user-friendly for y'all as possible. So yes, I lead the Civil War and Reconstruction Governors of Mississippi project. This is very much a partnership between the Mississippi Department of Archives and History, the Mississippi Digital Library, and the history program at the University of Southern Mississippi. Every year we hire talented undergraduates from across the state, not just at USM, community colleges, small, big colleges, universities, whatever people are interested in. If you want to see kind of the main website for the project and you just kind of want to explore a little bit as I'm talking, I put the link in the chat for everybody to go ahead and see that. All right. So what are we going to cover today? Number one, I want to make sure we kind of touch on ways that these documents address the issues that you need to cover in the classroom, that the state standards expect you to cover, that also a lot of kind of national standards are going to weave in here as well. I want to make sure I make it very clear on how you can find these documents easily. Like I said, by the time we're done with this project, there's going to be 20,000 documents, and the last thing we want is a document dump. So we've tried to make these as accessible as possible and as easily navigable as we possibly can. And I'm also going to be interested in kind of seeing people kind of connect these documents, maybe to your local city or your town, or maybe the county where you're teaching, if you're an educator here in the state of Mississippi. I'm going to show you our sample document site, which pulls kind of a nice range of documents from the entire period of the project. So from the beginning of John Pettus's administration in 1859, running all the way through the end of Reconstruction and really into kind of the beginning of the Jim Crow South, ending in 1882 with the end of Governor Stone, John Marshall Stone's first term in office. There's also some lesson plans there, and we're going to be adding more lesson plans to the website this fall. So this month, the fall is ending. So I want to make sure I show you those there too. In case anybody's interested, we always are happy to work with classes. If classes want to help, we have a big team of volunteer transcribers. Sometimes transcriptions in classrooms might feel a little intimidating. I'll talk to you a little bit about how teachers have done this in the past effectively. It's a great way to get students involved in the process of how historians work, rather than just kind of learning from historians and learning from historical documents, actually to be in the process of scholarship, of doing the work of the scholar. And last today, I'm going to have you kind of take some time to really explore the cwrgm.org website to make sure you can find some of the documents you want while I'm still with y'all here. And so that you can really kind of look at these and explore. All right, some of the topics we're going to make sure we discuss, very much kind of feeding into the session. You know, earlier this morning, we're going to be looking at some of these readiness standards that include issues absolutely of slavery, which is so central to the Civil War and Reconstruction, but also a lot of kind of these other issues that you're expected to be able to kind of address and incorporate, and that your students are going to be expected to understand and really be able to kind of analyze and discuss. We're also kind of thinking about some of these college and career readiness standards for social studies, including issues like governments, Bill of Rights, due process, assembly, petitions, kind of all these things that the documents can really kind of help you explore with your students. And again, kind of hear from the people in the 19th century debating these issues, if you will. Last, we're going to be looking at some of these kind of social studies, additional kind of these standards with change over time, continuity, context, and things like that. So the documents are going to really help you work all of these kind of standards in, is very much a key point that I'm going to want you guys to kind of be thinking about as you go through this. If we could, can anybody just kind of either unmute yourselves? I'm a big fan of unmuting and just talking. Or by all means, just kind of put in the chat, just kind of who's here, where are you guys from? Give me a sense of kind of what's everybody kind of bringing to this discussion today. And maybe kind of what grade you teach. If you teach, you know, if you're here more for kind of Reconstruction, maybe you're here more for some issues of the Civil War years, anything like that. I would just love some folks to put into the chat, if you will.
I am teaching in Madison, and I teach AP US History, Anthropology, and US History too. So I have juniors and seniors.
Perfect. And what's your name? For whatever reason.
Jenna Murphy.
Perfect. Thanks, Jenna. All right, Loosedale, Mississippi Studies, 8th grade. Cool. From Greenville. Ooh, good. We've got language arts. Cool. Okay. Oh, is it Bakari? I'm gonna, you know, with a last name like mine, I should never butcher anybody's name, but I bet I did. If you're interested in some language arts lesson plans, Jared Woods, who you guys just saw in the earlier session, has done one of our lesson plans that's live at the sample document site. I'll be showing you. And then we've got another one of his that we're going to be putting up this month. So by all means, we have both English and history. Ooh, I got your name right. Fantastic. English and history lesson plans. All right, we've got Florence, Northwest Rankin. We got some more English, language arts. Cool. Oh, cool. We got a librarian here. Awesome. In Jackson, Harrison County. Okay, good. We've got a nice kind of spread of the state here. Represented. Y'all just kind of keep putting that in the chat for me, if you will. I just kind of love to know kind of who I'm talking to. And just kind of, you know, by all means, kind of pipe up and kind of mention if there's anything in particular that you're going to be looking for. I won't keep the chat open the whole time, otherwise I can't see what I'm doing. The wonders of Zoom. But if I'm forgetting anything, just obviously just pipe up, y'all. All right, so who is in CWRGM? Kind of what is CWRGM? Let's get some fundamentals in place here before we go too far today. Hold on, you guys. Let me go back. There we go. Basically, what happens in the 19th century, and this is true across the state, by the way, if we have educators here from outside of Mississippi, There are other governors projects. There's only one other in existence. The first one started in Kentucky. Mississippi is the second one, and they're working on one in Alabama right now. But if you go to your state archives in any state across the nation, well, excuse me, in any state that existed as a state in the 19th century, which is a lot of them. And you can get into some governor's papers. People wrote to their governor like we almost use social media today. They'll try and clean it up a little bit, right? They feel like, you know, they're talking to the state executive, but they talk to their governor about anything. It can range from murder to someone stole my horse. And that's the person to whom they will bring their complaint. The coolest thing about it from an educator perspective is I think one of the things a lot of us try and do for our students is help our students hear from people that we got to cover in the standards, a lot of the big names, right? But you also want to help your students hear from people who are very much kind of like them, that are going to kind of come from this kind of cross-section experience. You might work in school districts that have, for example, that are incredibly diverse. You might come from school districts that have a much larger representation of African-American students. Maybe you're going to have more Hispanic students. Maybe you're going to have students who really come from rural areas as opposed to an urban kind of Jackson setting. So the coolest thing I think about the collection is it lets us hear from a massive cross-section of Mississippians at one of the most revolutionary times in US history, when you're seeing, I mean, this transition with the collapse and the destruction of slavery, with this just kind of overhaul of American society that emancipation brings, that you're going to see with the experience of just war that Mississippi felt in a very, very physical way. So when I say this is, you know, the state's governor's papers for the period of the Civil War and Reconstruction, it sounds like we're really just going to be hearing from the governor, maybe the lieutenant governor, folks like that. No, you almost never hear from them. What you're hearing and what you're reading is people from all over the state, sometimes from outside of the state, writing into the governor of Mississippi about a host of issues. And so that's one of the reasons we've wanted to make this project so accessible. So what in terms kind of is the project? We're taking all of these documents that came into the governor's office over the period, like I said, starting with Pettus in 1859, working all the way through John Marshall Stone, ending with his first term in 1882. And we are digitizing the original documents. When I say we, I'm using the imperial we here. Our friends at State Archives, at Mississippi Department of Archives and History, handled the digitization of everything. We then write metadata for the documents. So who wrote it, where was it written, when was it written, generally kind of what is it about? That's kind of what metadata is. And metadata just helps you find things. If you've ever used something like Family Search, for example, some ancestry records, but especially things maybe like Family Search that will have county records, and they broke it down by county, they broke it down by year, but now you're going to have to click your way through all these PDFs. It's wonderful to have that material, but a lot of people don't have the time or the inclination to actually do that. Often our students don't at all, if they even have kind of great internet access to get them access to this, right? So the idea of our project is not only are we putting these documents online with metadata that helps you explore them, but we're actually transcribing them. And we also tag the document. So if you click on a letter that's came out of, say, Madison, Mississippi, or maybe Canton, Mississippi, or maybe down in Harrison County, you can pull up all the documents from Canton, from Harrison County, from wherever it was written, and it kind of lets you focus your exploration, if you will. We're going to be doing annotations so that if your students see something that mentions the Battle of Shiloh, there'll be a quick summary of what the Battle of Shiloh is. And like I said, we offer lesson plans. We're going to be putting up blog posts this year on special issues. And we did this podcast series with 5 episodes last spring to kind of give folks an introduction to the project. And I'll show you, like I said, all of that stuff is available at cwrgm.org. By 2030, we're hoping to have all 20,000 documents up, transcribed, available, all that good stuff, ready to go. So it's a huge project, big research team. We employ about a dozen student researchers at the undergraduate and graduate level every year. If you guys are kind of like, oh, I've got one of my seniors who's going to be graduating soon, she's going to be going here, or he's going to be going there, this person would be fantastic. Make sure they get in touch with me. We're going to be hiring again in the summer. probably around July. So, and this would be for the fall semester. So make sure, reach out. You can do it from anywhere. All of our work is done remotely. All right. So now what I want to do is give you just kind of a quick example of kind of what kind of documents you're going to find. And you guys, if you have questions as you go along, please, by all means, please, by all means, put something in the chat or just kind of unmute yourselves. I'm going to pause for a second in case anybody has a question that they want to ask. All right. So this first document I want to show you just to give you a sense of kind of, okay, you've heard me describe what's here, but let's kind of look at what's here and get a sense of what you can find as you explore the site. This is from a man who writes to the governor shortly after John Brown's raid at Harper's Ferry, Virginia at the time, West Virginia now, kind of raising these concerns about abolition and fanatics and this fear, this very, very genuine fear that a lot of white Mississippians had about enslaved people rising up and leading a violent insurrection. This is a fear you can see in Mississippi records kind of throughout the antebellum period. You can find it pretty much anywhere. As long as slavery existed, whites were worried that enslaved people were going to rise up. And of course, there are some histories of slave uprisings in the United States and elsewhere during that time period. And what Thornton's writing to the governor about is making sure he's kind of aware of this possibility, certainly in Mississippi. All right. Next one I want to share with y'all. And hold on, I'm reading. Angelia, yeah, okay, cool. Yes, yeah. MDAH, these records, absolutely. I mean, this is, if you've ever worked with some of those records at MDH, this is exactly what we do. And that link to from the page is what we're going to be getting to kind of later this morning here as I kind of show you how you can get your students involved in some of this transcription work if you want. This letter on the screen now is from a woman by the name of Mary Jones. She actually has two letters in the project that surface in 1862. So this is certainly, you're about a year into the war, a little beyond a year by the time her second letter comes in September of that year. And what she's revealing is something that historians talk about, that you may talk about with your students in the classroom, this kind of war weariness that creeps into Mississippi as what you often see in times of war. Thomas Paine wrote about it, right? Summer soldiers and sunshine patriots kind of going off to war. But the times that try men's souls, he wrote, are the times when the violence and the destructiveness and the suffering and the sadness, the tragedy of war, as that sinks in, as so many of our students, and we know from experiencing, the last 20 years with Iraq and Afghanistan, it's obviously kind of touched a lot of us and a lot of our students in very personal ways. So I found that students, this really resonates with them, kind of hearing not just from soldiers, as you will hear from a lot in these records, but also from soldiers' families and what they're experiencing and the desperate help they need. Mary Jones here, she's kind of revealing the fact that she has children she needs to provide for. She is a widow. She can't seem to get any help. And Southern states throughout the Civil War, Northern states as well, would provide county level assistance. That's usually where you got your assistance if you were impoverished during this time period. It would be at the county, the local level. And what she's writing in is basically that nobody's helping me basically because they don't see me as a local. I'm not necessarily originally from this community, and I desperately need this help. I need this assistance. This letter is absolutely one of my favorites. I think one of the coolest things about the project is that because we decided not to end it at the end of the Civil War, I really wanted to take it through Reconstruction to make sure that in the states where over 50% of the population was African-American in the 1860s, that you heard from that population as much as you can. This letter comes in from Lambert Moore. He was enslaved during the Civil War. And after the war, the governor, Sharkey, he enacted a law basically that taxed people on their wartime earnings. And what Lambert Moore, who hires some attorneys to make this case for him, it's interesting. Sometimes you'll see people who have attorneys write in. Sometimes you'll see people who have someone write for them, that they're either semi-literate or they're illiterate and they're unable to write and they make their mark. In this case, Lambert Moore has enough money to hire attorneys And he says, look, basically when I was enslaved, I was allowed to hire myself out. I made a certain amount of money and you're taxing me on that money. The problem is because I was enslaved, I already paid a portion of my earnings to the man who owned me at that time. I'm not getting double taxed is what Lambert Moore says. And he protests this to the governor. And I want you guys to notice the date on this document, September 1865. The 13th Amendment hasn't even been ratified in Congress yet. And you're seeing Lambert Moore not only making this very swift transition from enslavement to freedom, from enslavement to being a businessman, but also from absolutely seeing himself as a citizen who has the right to not only contact the governor, but to make his case to the governor. And what's interesting is basically the case that Moore and his attorneys make to the governor is that, look, you can either give me back the tax that was just collected by the local sheriff, or you can figure out how much I'm actually owed for my entire period of enslavement. And the governor decides he does not want to tackle the bigger issue. And if you notice down here at the bottom, it says remit. A lot of times on the back of the documents, the governor's secretary would make a quick kind of summary of what is going on, what the kind of the concern is, and maybe every once in a while how it was handled. And that's how we know that Lambert Moore successfully pleaded his case and he got his tax funds back. It's a great document for talking with students about just kind of beat down this myth, right? That African Americans just couldn't make that transition effectively from enslavement to freedom, that, you know, they couldn't make that transition to the responsibilities of citizenship. It's a great document to help you kind of challenge some of these stereotypes. Yeah, Stephanie, exactly. The coolest thing I love is when you guys bring in some other sources to help, again, kind of make these cases to the students, but so that it's not just us telling the students about this, right? It's the students hearing it from these people from the 19th century at the time period. This is another document that I often love to bring up and share with folks, because when we talk about Mississippi soldiers in the Civil War, 9 times out of 10, I think most people envision Confederate soldiers, and they were absolutely the majority of soldiers recruited and raised out of the state of Mississippi. What we forget, though, is that there were about 17 to 20,000 African Americans who fought from Mississippi for the Union, and that there were also white Mississippians who fought for the US as well. This is a letter from one of those men. W.T. Rowland was a white man coming from the northern part of the state. And you know what he says is basically, look, when the war began, I absolutely was not going to fight for the Confederacy. When the Confederacy passed a draft that was going to force me to serve, I went north. He went up into Tennessee and joined up with a federal unit there. And he served in the 11th Illinois Cavalry for the next 3 years, through 1865. He comes home to Mississippi, comes back to his home in Tippah County. And there's a number of men kind of from his community, some families, some just neighbors, who had served in northern units, including in that same cavalry unit with him. So they come home and they're being forced to take the loyalty oath. And there's this great letter to the governor basically saying, you know, pray tell, what constitutes a loyal citizen, if not for a guy who just spent the last 3 years of his life fighting for the Union? And so this is one of those letters that I love to bring up, because we forget, I think, because the Lost Cause was so effective in kind of shaping how we understand the Civil War, particularly, excuse me, in the southern portions of the United States, that when we think of soldiers coming out of a southern state that was part of the Confederacy, we think of Confederate soldiers. And we very much forget how much resistance there was. We might remember things like the Free State of Jones, but we think of these as anomalies. There were whites and absolutely far more African Americans who served from Confederate states in federal units than we recognize, that the wartime generation knew about. That was very much kind of part of this wartime experience, but that has largely been forgotten. And so again, a document like this can help your students remember that, can help them see this. All right, here's one of the last documents I want to show you. This is a really important one from 1876, right down at the end of Reconstruction. And I love to use this with students because it helps them see what's happening as federal units are leaving southern states across the former Confederacy, and as the federal government is refusing to get involved to provide basic fundamental security and protections and law and order in the state. Mark Joseph was Justice of the Peace of Madison County, Mississippi. He was also a Union veteran. So this would be a federal soldier who had stayed in Mississippi after the war. And there were hundreds of these men all over the state who had served in Mississippi. Maybe they were part of occupation troops during Reconstruction, and then they choose to stay and build businesses and lives here. And what he's describing in January 1876 is this kind of brutal assault that's taking place against African Americans kind of throughout Madison County, describing kind of the attack on the Fairfax house, an African-American man, how he's desperately, literally just to save his life, he's having to kind of run away and live as a refugee away from his own home and family. And what Joseph is saying is like, look, I don't have enough men to maintain basic law and order. I need the governor's help. Adelbert Ames, governor of Mississippi at the time, writes to kind of the federal government trying to get more help. And the federal government isn't going to help involved. A lot of Northerners, white Northerners in particular, absolutely were just basically almost saw the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments as enough. Enough has been done, if you will. And, you know, we can't do any more. This war has gone on long enough. And this is what you're watching, right? You're watching the breakdown of the stability that portions of the state were able to feel during Reconstruction, the advances that African Americans were able to make when you had law and order across the state. And you're watching that shatter as you go. Yes, the documents and the letters are all available. Next up, I'm going to show you. So good timing with your question. I love that. All right, so finding what you need at cwrgm.org. I'm going to show you here a couple methods for getting to what you want. Number one, you can always do a simple keyword search, and that's great. But for some of your students in particular who don't have your knowledge of the Civil War and Reconstruction, I think one of the things that helps them is when we break some things down and we kind of organize and let them browse by these categories. So they can search, let's say you're talking in class about the Emancipation Proclamation. They can kind of find documents under events tied to the Emancipation Proclamation. Let's say you're talking about a particular battle. You're talking about kind of the military experience, and you want your students to be able to, maybe you've got a student who really loves military history and they want to focus on a unit that was raised in your community. Go to the military history link. Occupations, organizations, and businesses. You can see all of this kind of under these categories of how we've organized things. Social identifiers, I'll briefly explain what that is as I pull up the site here. Social identifiers are things that help us, how should I phrase this? We develop the social identifiers as ways, hold on you guys, I literally can't talk and share a screen at the same time. There we go, thank you. As ways to help people find individuals in particular who you don't often find, right? So if you go under people, okay, well, if you know exactly who you're searching for, this will work. But, you know, we already have almost 8,500 people tagged in here, right? So, and maybe you're only going to get particularly men, and you have a lot of women who write in as Mrs. John Smith, and it makes me crazy, but this is what we have. And if it's a name like Smith, good luck for us finding it. So we created social identifiers to help us find those people or those groups that we don't often find. That are sometimes, these are things that are difficult to kind of track in documents. They're often individuals from communities who are often underrepresented. So social identifiers helps you explore the documents this way. But if you know, like if you do something like Lambert Moore to kind of try and find that document that I was just sharing with you earlier, you were like, oh, I want to use that Lambert Moore document. Okay, here's Robert Moore. You're like, nope, here we go. Here's that Lambert Moore document that I want. So you're going to be able to do it that way. Okay, so there's a host of ways that you can go ahead and explore these documents. When you get to the document, you guys, I think one of the coolest thing about it is that, like I said earlier today, you can kind of click on particular names if you're interested in legal history, if you're interested in African-American experience, if you're interested in just documents coming from a particular county, things like this. You can click and you'll get pulled to any of the documents we have right now for Marshall County, Mississippi. The other thing I like that we do, if you see how this kind of pop up, when you see a racial slur like colored in 19th century documents, sometimes students almost start to adopt the language because they see it in the transcription. So it's almost like it becomes okay to use that term. And one of the things we wanted to make sure we did was that the pop-up provides users with the appropriate term to use in their writing, particularly if there's some kind of younger students who might not necessarily know, might kind of feel like, well, the term is there in this official website, so it must be okay. The term is there in the official website because that's the standards that the field requires for transcriptions. You transcribe that document word for word. We don't change the way people talk in the 19th century. As a historian, I think there's a very good reason we don't do that. You want to know exactly what people said and the way they behave so we can learn from that, but you don't want to perpetuate that, right? Down here, not only will you get kind of this full transcription of the document. Again, if we wanted to click on Holly Springs here, it's going to take us to all the documents we have up so far from Holly Springs. Keep in mind, when I say so far, we're about, I think we have about 3,500 documents up right now. We'll probably have close to 4,000 by the early spring, but that's of 20-some thousand, right? So we're going as fast as we can. We're into kind of 1863, but we're also starting to hop around a little bit. We're going to get some early Reconstruction documents up this spring. And that kind of sampling of documents that I'm going to show you, those sample documents are all in here. So if you really just kind of want to pull up some documents from a particular time period, you can absolutely do that. So like I said, if you had clicked on, this term colored here, and by the way, Lambert Moore is not hyperlinked here because he's hyperlinked above. We only hyperlinked one person's name one time, but it also helps you make sure that if there's any additional documents, from him, you'll be able to find those. But like I said, it also lets you kind of think about, okay, what criminal justice and the law, agriculture, and kind of elite wealth, these locations. It helps you kind of think about different experiences, if you will. And so then again, you can jump to all the documents we have based on these different tags. Is all of that making sense? I'm going to pause here real quick in case anybody has any questions. So far, so good. Okay, sounds good. Now, one other thing I wanted to show y'all, under here, under educator resources is where you can see lesson plans. And that jumps you to our sample document site. And I'll put the link for the sample document site. It's my name, SusannaJUral.com/CWRGM. But these lesson plans we have 4 available right now that focus on kind of 4 key themes within the project. Al Wheat did our memory and commemoration lesson plan. Jared Woods, who you guys met earlier today, did one of our lesson plans for exploring kind of citizenship, emancipation and citizenship, excuse me. I'll show you just kind of quickly one of these lessons. So we've got the lesson plan, we have an original image of the letter, we have a transcription of the letter, and this is true for any of these documents. Hold on, y'all. Let me check the chat. Yep, they're going to be posted, slideshow. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and you guys, if you need anything, if you have any questions, just email me. We're all in this together, y'all. We got to help each other out. Okay, so all of that's good. Any other questions before I hop back to the PowerPoint? You guys, how long have we all been using Zoom? And I'm still like, I have to get back to my PowerPoint. How do I do that? All right,
Ms. Earl, I don't have a question. This is Stephanie Bryson, but I do have a recommendation. Very few times are our librarians, very few times are we included in professional development for teachers. And yet, if we were included more, or if you all had the opportunity to just focus on librarians, we ought to be the curators of this information and the collectors of these information for our schools. So to a certain degree, you would be able to cover more. You would have you know, like you'd be able to cover more.
Mhm.
In the sense that you have a place for your if your librarians know, if every school librarian knows how to access this, then we become your arms and hands and legs and feet to be able to disseminate this information to the teachers and our
Yeah.
own site-based PDs and PLCs and so forth. So don't overlook us.
I
Don't
love
overlook us.
that.
Mhm.
I would love to tell you that I did not overlook librarians, but I did. But I won't anymore. So thank you, Stephanie.
You're
If you
welcome.
don't have my email, I'll put it in the chat. Let's talk. Okay, because we have one of the NEH grants that I have funds educator workshops every year, and I work with Al in setting these up. So let's make sure we get you in. And if you can't do it, that you can make sure you let us know somebody who might be able to.
I can give you that. Our lead librarian and another person at the Mississippi Department of Education level is Elizabeth Simmons. She's she's just an amazing asset for the state.
Perfect.
But that is she's over the state. And then here at our, like just JPS is Jeanette Wessington. So if you talk to
Perfect.
those people. Mhm.
I'm going to reach out because there's no way I'm going to remember all that right now, but I'm definitely going to make sure I get to know these people. Thank you very much. Okay, covered lesson plans. We got that covered. Okay, the one other thing I promised to talk with you all about that I want to mention briefly is something called From the Page. From the Page is where we do our transcription work. It is, we have a huge group of volunteers who help us transcribe documents. Let me scroll up to the top. If you just go to fromthepage.org, the link is in the chat. You can, hold on, I'll sign out so you can see what I do. But if you go, you can sign up to transcribe. All of this is free, you guys. You go ahead, you just kind of click, you sign up, you kind of create your account and all like that. You just do a quick search for us. Come on. You do a quick search for us under Find a Project. I'm pretty sure we're still the only one from Mississippi. So if you just type in Mississippi real quick, you will find the Civil War and Reconstruction Governors of Mississippi Project. There is a quick guide that teaches volunteers kind of how to transcribe. I'm going to run through it very, very quickly in a second. There's some more transcription protocols, but honestly, y'all, I would just use the quick guide with your students if you wanted to. And then all you're going to do is kind of find a document that somebody else hasn't transcribed. As you can see, they've already done this one. So you're like, all right, never mind. Let me find one that I know is definitely not transcribed. I'm going to pull this one up, and literally all you would do is start transcribing. It is that simple. The technique that has really worked in classrooms, and I've talked with educators who've done this as low as like 4th and 5th grade, is to put this on the screen and have the whole class practice transcribing, kind of working on it together, or maybe working in groups, and then have the whole class kind of pitch in while you start, typing away and explaining things. And it's fun, you can teach them. This is what, when you have two S's together, it often looks like an FS in the 19th century. So, as I always joke, it's like, it's the pursuit of happiness. It's fun. You kind of teach students this stuff. A lot of our students I know are not learning cursive like we once did, but that's coming back. And some of them, if you are teaching it and you want to get them involved, it's a great way, like I said, to be a part of this. The basic rules, you guys, are so simple. Don't correct anything. Transcribe it like it is, including the wretched punctuation. Duplicate words, keep them, keep that messiness. Linguists love it because it's a great way. I was just working on a letter where the woman, I mean, it's horrible. It's horribly written, but it's beautifully written because every word is sounded out basically. So you can literally hear how she would pronounce these words. Don't worry about fixing the formatting, just make everything left justified. It doesn't have to look like the document because as you just saw, you're going to see the document right next to it. Little rules about inserting an extra space. That long S, like I described in Mississippi, looks like an FS. Right, there isn't a great example of it kind of up close. And like I said, just let the students have fun with it. If you get a document, you're like, oh my gosh, this thing is 4 pages, skip it, go find an easier one. Don't worry about it. We've got a lot of telegrams up there right now. So I want everybody to have fun with it. Okay, time for a practice activity. Let me pause real quick in case there's any questions. All doing okay? All right, so what I'm going to want you to do is go to cwrgm.org. And, you know, like I said in number 1, think about an event, maybe a person that's covered in the standards, or an issue that you regularly cover in class. Go to the website, and I'm going to go with you here in a second to kind of get you started, and try and find documents that might help you explore that issue or that person or that change over time, or to think about context with your students. And then what I want you to also think about, if you're in the state of Mississippi, see if you can find some documents from your town, your county, maybe the school district where you're working, so that the students, the coolest thing I think sometimes with students pulling in local history is when they're like, oh, I know that family, I know that name. And as we well know, it may or may not actually be the family, but they recognize the name that is still prominent in their community. They recognize street names that we love to have people like that giving us input. Okay. Hold on, you guys, I'm just checking this. Good, good, good. Okay, everybody's got the website. Okay. And then, you know, as you explore, just, you know, I'm just going to want to hear back from you about kind of what's been most useful to you, what portions of the site might be most useful for your students, and then any kind of suggestions. So let's go to cwrgm.org. Go back to the website. Okay. And then, like I said, if you go under Explore the Collection, that's where you can find these different categories, right? So let's say you always talk about the Emancipation Proclamation. All right, we've got 3 documents that specifically talk about the Emancipation Proclamation. We've got 14 that talk about emancipation in general. Maybe you always do a big, you know, you try your students, you love political history and you have your students do a mock campaign of the election of 1860. You can go to documents tied to that. So like I said, go ahead and just kind of explore what you know, how you might use the site. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of time here to just go ahead and do that. And if you have any questions while you're working, just unmute or put it in the chat.
I love this. I absolutely love this. And I think this is a fabulous resource for us. But I have to say, I'm one of the 3% Catholics in the state of Mississippi. And I have been learning in my, like, like I had no idea about this, but and I'm from Natchez. I grew up in Natchez. So I am just learning more and more about my own hometown. One, that the first Bigfoot sighting ever recorded was by a Jesuit priest who was living in and amongst the French settlers and the Native Americans in Natchez in the 1700s. And that has led me to look at some other things that would seem counterintuitive when people, especially when people want to bash Mississippi. And one of the other things I learned, but not from your site, which is interesting, is I just really quickly typed in Sacred Heart Academy, and that was the very first seminary in the entire United States for African American Catholics. For men.
But if nobody has written into the governor
Yeah.
about it yet,
Yeah.
it's not going to show up. But what will show up under social identifiers under C
Mm-hmm.
are 2 documents talking about Catholics.
Yeah, and one an Irish woman, Irish immigrant, a widow who
Good.
needs help,
Yeah.
and would also probably make a good daughter of charity, who had that order had a pretty big influence or representation here in the United States or
Yeah.
here in Mississippi.
Right.
So yeah, so I just think obviously there's much more to be gathered. But then this is just great because with the technology, we're able to permanently record these historically significant persons, places, people, and events. So
Right.
I love it. This is
people
great.
or people who weren't significant. I mean, to me, that's one of the most important things that this project.
But I think there's a significance in the daily, Lidor Welty writes so much about sense of place. Sense of place is very important to our culture. So the insignificant person, there's a principle in Catholic philosophy and economics called the principle of subsidiarity. And it's the idea that the person closest to the problem is the person who should deal with that problem unless they cannot deal with it. And our culture is born out of the family, and it is born out of
Right.
the
But
family.
and I also think, Stephanie, I think the other thing to think about too, right, is that so often I think very few of us think that we have anything significant enough in our lives or that we're contributing that would be worthy of, preserving our letters or anything like that in the state archives. And it's this wonderful way, I think, for students to realize that, significance is, there's many definitions to this, right? As you were just saying, and what may have been viewed as insignificant people in the 19th century are very significant people who should be examined. Jenna, yeah. So yes, these letters are amazing in terms of like almost what I think 50 years ago historians would maybe call the trivial. Right, that why are you writing to the governor about this? But again, nowhere else are you going to be able to find these kind of daily experiences. Good luck finding these things, and thank heavens. I mean, the state archives have been collecting these things. Basically, it was one of their original missions. But unless you can actually get there and really sit down and explore these, that's been the issue. I was in a workshop where Senator Hyde-Smith was attending, and I was making a comment that, you wouldn't believe what people wrote to the governor. And she was like, actually, I know exactly what they write. So maybe people are definitely still writing in like this to this day. I don't know. But it's certainly great that we can get this. And yeah, not everything will be covered. But again, that's why we're using these tagging features to get you to some general subjects in case the specific one hasn't been covered. Keep in mind too, like I said, we're about 3,000 to 4,000 documents in of 20,000. So we're going to keep kind of getting more as we go. Jenna, what's up? Your hand is up.
I just think it's really great to show how, my students at least tend to think of government as this lofty thing. And, you're dealing with these big issues when it's like, when you're really looking at, when you get down to the nitty gritty of local government, it really is. I mean, these day-to-day things of like, hey, I need this street to go like 200 more feet so that I can get my carriage into, the place where I need to get to so that I can get my cows. And, I try to emphasize that a lot of the times with them. I'm like, yeah, it's not always this $1 trillion budget issue. I said, but those kind of little issues are just as important to the citizens as those $1 trillion budget issues, because if you can't live your life on the day to day, who cares about what is, where this money is going to, when, like it is, a lot of times you just got to get to your cows so that you can actually pay those taxes.
Right. Yeah. And it's also a great way to, when we talk about like equal protection clauses and, what that kind of means for people. Well, if you can pull up the Mark Joseph letter talking about what Bayless Fairfax is experiencing as, these men are literally, shooting up his home because he's an African-American man asserting his own rights as a citizen. This is why we have those protections. This is what it looks like when we don't make sure those are coming into play in our society. So yeah, absolutely. But it's not all, the Constitutional Convention sitting around in Philadelphia doing these amazing, profound things.
One of the things that I actually was looking for specifically was the fact that the state of Mississippi is one of the earliest states to outlaw coverture, which is, the fact that women are legally bound with their husband under law. And I didn't really realize that until I was making some like offhand remark going, yeah, Mississippi, ha ha ha, we never do anything, blah, blah, I was joking around with them. And then I was like, well, I wonder, just out of curiosity, when did we abolish it? And then I looked at it, I was like, oh my goodness, we were one of the first, who knew? And I was trying to see if there was anything in there, about that. But again, if it hasn't either been transcribed or if, nobody just decided to write about it, it won't be there. But I really thought that I was going, oh, maybe I can find something. And then, I'll show it to them and they'll roll their eyes at me again.
I'm going to explore that one. One of the things we don't just tag, for example, is just kind of women in general, just because, it's a huge portion of the population. But, let's kind of think about, wait, you know what? It'd be under vital statistics is where marriage is going to be.
Because I was looking through, I think the one that I clicked on, one of the tags was women and children.
Yeah.
And I keep getting a lot of letters from women, saying, hey, like one woman was like, my son, he went off to be a drummer and I don't want him to be. So can you send him back to me, please? Like, I was like, oh yeah, that sounds just like a mama. But
there's a
that was
lot
one
of those.
Yeah.
Maybe check under marriage, under vital statistics. And let's see if we can't find something there. And then I'm just going to do some digging around. And I'll see if I can kind of find it. And then I'll reach out to you afterwards too, to see if I can get something for your students.
Thank you so much.
Great. Yeah. What else, you guys? Our clock and our time is kind of ticking down here, and I want to make sure we kind of respect everybody's time. But any questions? Oh yeah, by the way, if you've got students who you're just like, they will never be able to get through the cursive. And I get it. My son is one of them. We do have some documents that are already, they're very much kind of TypeScript that you could use as well. Jenna, is your hand up again? Or it might not be.
It's not. I'm just not sure how to get rid of it.
I know. We all do it. It's just like, I've been in Zoom a while, but I don't know how to do it. What about any feedback anybody wants to share? Are there parts of the site where you're like, oh my gosh, give me some more lesson plans, but make sure you cover this, or would you cover that, or anything like that?
I don't like to interrupt myself to leave it to participants, but I did want to point out that we do have a couple of world history teachers, and there's some really interesting letters. And I know this because it's what I wrote my lesson plan. One of my lesson plans on this is on immigrants during like them both wanting and not wanting specific parts of becoming citizens, being very picky and choosy about what they did and did not want to be included as a citizen about. So that was kind of a fascinating aspect that you make it include if you are a world history teacher out there.
Yeah, you'll definitely see here. If you just want to look at immigrant kind of experiences in general, or you can see when it gets broken down into specific kind of immigrant groups. And like I said, we're going to have 4 more lesson plans going up this month. I'm trying to think of what else I could share. I don't know if there's any other questions or any other kind of like, I'm trying to navigate and I can't figure this out, anything like that, y'all just shout out. Letters addressed as Your Excellency. Yeah, right. I mean, it's the kind of like, I don't know, the proper of how you're supposed to do these things. Certainly in the 19th century.
It's a more formal type of salutation, you know.
Definitely.
Yeah, we Catholics are, I mean, technically we should be calling our bishops Your Excellency, and we should still be kissing their fingers, but we don't. You know? No one's done that for a long time.
Exactly. And it's interesting to me too, how people will make their appeals. If you explore the Mary Jones letter, she talks to the governor. Let's see if I can find it real quick. She talks to the governor. She asks him basically to intervene for her like a father. So sometimes they'll get on kind of very personal in the letters too. Yeah, Mary Jones is going to pull up too much if I do it that way. Nope, here we go. And you know, she'll very much ask him to act. I'm trying to remember if it's this one. Yeah, I hope you will act a father's part toward me, your humble servant. So she's very much kind of personalizing it as well. And yeah, you'll see a lot of this honorable sir, the honorable governor, those types of things.
I think it's also a takeaway. I was just reading not too long ago, and I cannot remember the source, but we were a lot more literate as a nation than I think we've been led to believe.
Well, it depends on how you define it, right? Yeah, because you can find a person who's actually semi-literate who's discussing some of Shakespeare's plays because
Exactly.
you know, they saw them coming through town. Yeah, it's a great point,
Yeah.
Stephanie.
Mhm.
All right, you guys. Al, I think, or I don't know who's gonna wrap this one up, but I think unless there's anything else I can help cover for anyone or explain or anything like that, we are good to go.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. I appreciate so much that y'all have been working your tails off all fall, and this is what you're doing on a Saturday morning. So it was a pleasure to be with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think you have one last comment, if you want to at least read it to yourself in the chat. So people loving the local letters. It's amazing.
Yes, good. I love hearing that. Thank you.
Cool. So I think especially now that we've kind of had some amazing presenters the past sessions this morning, I think I want to just refresh everybody's mind about some of the things we mentioned at the beginning of our day that now might have piqued your interest a bit more. And just to kind of, so number one is we've kind of talked about our interest sheet. And so I might repost that in the chat. And so I think just our emphasis on how the presenters today have talked about primary sources, have talked about letting students really get involved in things that they are interested in and things inside and outside of standards. That is something that we really love about Mississippi History Day, and whether it's something you'd like to think about today for this year, for next year, it really gives students a chance to kind of see a lot of these primary sources, learn how to analyze them, learn how to dig into them and get involved in things like, when Hurley White was talking about music and talking about all these different topics, it really gets them to get involved in something in both a modality and also a topic they're interested in. And so I'm going to throw that interest sheet back in here for you, as well as I'm going to repost in the chat our educator resource page. So this is really a PDF that we'll send out your survey at the end of week 2 also, but just has a lot of good links from a lot of our partner groups that we have talked to today, or that we've previously used as vendors during our workshop when we've been able to be in person together. So we want you to see those. We'll send it out again, but that's for you there. So just some reminders. Thank you for hanging with us today. Is that we are excited to see you next Saturday. If you need CEU credit, just as a reminder that you need to attend both today and next week to get that CEU credit for the minimum 5 hours. We will send the links out for those sessions again at the end of next week so that they pop up in your inbox, but you have all those Zoom links already. We, as Maria had mentioned at the beginning of the day, we'll send you a fuller survey at the end of week 2, but in case there's anything off the top of your mind you want to let us know that you'd rather put in writing, we're throwing a 1-question survey into the chat right now that you can fill out. I believe it is anonymous, so if there's anything that you want us to contact you about specifically, please put your name or email on there. But feel free to give us any initial feedback on that right now. And then just as a reminder is that we will hang around right now for about 10 minutes or so. If there's anything with our resources, with traveling trunks, with field trips, with History Day, with Mississippi History Now, anything the panel mentioned, anything Dr. Ural mentioned, if there's anything you'd like to kind of get our ear on and talk a little one-on-one about, or just kind of throw out any other general questions to us, we'll hang out here for about another 10 minutes if you want to chat about anything. But if not, feel free, anybody else jump in if I've forgotten anything, but I think that is mostly it. So thank you so much for joining us for this first day, and we are excited to see you next week.